Hey everyone, I am once again making a video for my automobile. Once again, I am recording this on my toaster. For various reasons, I have not made a video in a while. I have actually made about 10 videos, none of which I'm happy with. Uh, Technically, background-wise, I have grown to hate myself and the channel. And partly, I don't want to make a post-mortem because there are a billion post-mortems out there, particularly from liberals. But then I think to myself, I'm not a liberal. On the other hand, some of this stuff is complicated. And then also, a couple of people have expected me to do something about it or say something about the election. And I'm not sure what to do. I haven't been sure what to do. And I just was doing some paperwork for my family, and then I'm here in the parking lot, and I thought I would just get some thoughts out there in the universe. The first thought I have is that for most of my life, the Democrats have been at a disadvantage. Okay, the Republicans have had a huge advantage in the Electoral College. Okay, huge. And this was up until, I think, 2009. That's because, West Virginia went Republican in 2000, and a lot of states were basically Republican states, and the South is a huge swath of territory. And when you're talking about the South and a lot of the Midwest and a lot of the Western states going for Republicans, the Republicans just had a huge advantage, and particularly with Virginia. And then what happened was, starting in 2009, there were demographic changes, and which I'm not going to get into here, but basically college-educated people and young people showed up, particularly in Colorado and New Mexico and certain counties in Virginia. And the Democrats obtained an advantage in the Electoral College. Now, added to this, the branding of the Democratic Party is supposed to be that they represent the majority of the population, and nominally they represent workers. Republicans are supposed to represent business. Real life's a little bit more complicated than that, but let's start with that premise. So the Democrats, throughout most of that period, really post 1992, have basically won the popular vote pretty much all the time. So they won with Bill Clinton. They won with Al Gore. They won the popular vote. They didn't win in 2004, but they subsequently won in 2008. They won in 2012. And they basically win the popular vote every 4 years. Somehow, they've managed to take this advantage in both the popular vote and in the Electoral College, because Virginia is blue and Colorado is blue and New Mexico is blue. So if you take the states that carry one in 2004 and you add them to those three states, you get an automatic win. You don't need North Carolina, you don't need Georgia, and you don't need Arizona, and you don't need Nevada. But somehow, and then of course they win most of the votes. So somehow they've managed to take those advantages, okay? And this time around, they lost the popular vote, and they lost in the Electoral College, and they managed to actually drive down their own base so that Donald Trump actually widened his lead and also widened his performance demographically with people of color and with women. And they actually managed to get people not to go to the polls. And the people of color who did go to the polls voted for Trump. So they took those advantages and completely flushed them down the crapper. So that's my first thought. And there are specific reasons for that, which we can talk about over the next couple of videos. But bottom line is, I did not expect them to perform this badly. I did not expect them to drive down their vote. I didn't expect them to spend $1.5 billion and lose. They didn't regain the House. They lost the Senate, and they lost the White House. And my prediction basically came from a place of, the fact is, people in the United States don't really like Donald Trump. They don't. A majority of the population don't like him. But inviting a guy for dinner, apparently, isn't really what's going on here, because I'm sure if it came down to Harris or Donald Trump, people would vote for Harris if you were voting for somebody to live next to you or invite over for dinner. The reality is they want someone who's going to challenge the centers of power. The Martha's Vineyard set, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, the business interests. And when the Democratic Party ran someone who is clearly pro-establishment, who is clearly the high school principal, and then had that person spend 2 weeks pretending to be a progressive, and then spend the rest of the campaign not talking about progressive issues, but instead trying to remind people that the Cheney family endorsed her, okay? Trying to say that establishment Republicans supported her. The general impression that the campaign gave people was that if you're anti-establishment, you should vote for Donald Trump. If you're pro-establishment, you should vote for Harris. Now, some people were saying that it's a stupid criticism to say that she didn't run as a progressive. Okay, so first of all, if you run as a progressive for 2 weeks and then you don't talk about it for the rest of the campaign, you're not running as a progressive. A. B, it is irrelevant if you have 85 pages of material on your website. People are not reading your website. Low information voters who are not on these polls, who vote at the last minute and are the deciding factor, those people are not going to read your PDFs. They're not going to go to your website. They're not going to memorize your policy positions. They don't understand half of them. They want to know if you're going to put the chicken in the pot and if you're going to challenge the centers of power. And that's what it really comes down to. This administration, although it was promising in the first couple of years, the Biden administration, didn't really do enough for working people. Bottom line. So that's really, in a nutshell, why she lost. Of course, there are other things going on there. The Democrats have spent the last 40 years, yada, yada, betraying the working class. People don't believe them. Bottom line here, and this is important, is that when liberals do their postmortems of Harris, they usually go to depth 1. Sometimes they go to depth 2. Depth 1 is she ran a terrible campaign. Why did she run a terrible campaign? Because the entire infrastructure of the party, the whole thing, the skeleton of the party, are basically people who are overpaid consultants. And those people are not interested in winning. They're interested in making money. And they're interested in getting into a position where they defend each other's backs. They recommend one another for positions. They all think the same. They're only interested in winning the news cycle, not elections. They want to project calm. They want to project of moderation. They want to project establishment because that will keep the donor money flowing to them so they can continue to make a lot of money. And they take turns being in government or being in the consultant seat, or they may be at a nonprofit. That's their primary job, is basically spinning bullshit. And to do that, they have to keep the donors happy. Okay? That's the second level of analysis. Well, that's the first level of analysis. The second level of analysis is talking about what happened to the Democratic Party when Democrats turned their back on the working class and they became kind of anti-union and they became neoliberal, But there's a third layer, and the third layer is, well, the third layer is kind of related to the first layer. The Democratic Party is basically paid to lose. That's what they're there for. They are there to take up any left energy and dissipate it. They are there to never, ever, ever go too far to the left, but to present this weakened, do-nothing version of the left, which makes the right look more attractive. That's what they're there for. It is more important for the rich, the Democratic Party, not be progressive, not be populist, than it is to win elections. They would rather get Trump from now to the end of time than see their taxes go up, to see their investments nullified, like their investments in, say, United Healthcare, or their investments in Raytheon. They would rather that happen. They'd rather have Trump than have that, right? So Democrats are basically paid to lose. So that's why the situation is what the situation is like. There are individuals. There was one guy, it's a weird name. He went on MSNBC and he started complaining about, he was a millionaire donor to the Democratic Party, and he started complaining about Bernie Sanders and the language of Bernie Sanders. And since then, it's been impossible to run as a progressive. Barack Obama ran as one in 2008, But since then, there really hasn't been a successful progressive candidate for to be running for the nomination. Bernie was successful up to a point. That's a completely different video. He was able to get the support of young people and Midwesterners, and that's what kept him alive in the 2016 primaries for a long time. And he should have won that contest, and he didn't. And then when he ran again in 2020, he didn't have that much support from young people, and the Midwesterners ended up succumbing to Biden's folksiness, Oh, well, I'm working class people, I'm pro-union. And he was already beaten, really. Even though he won the first three primaries in 2020, he couldn't compete with the structure of the Democratic Party, which is to say, Super Tuesday, South Carolina and Super Tuesday are basically designed to prevent anyone from doing anything progressive. That's what it's there for. And it did its job nicely with him. So elites didn't want Bernie Sanders. They preferred Trump. That's the sad truth. And I don't see the party changing, because that is the role of the Democratic Party under capitalism. Chief role is to prevent change. So when they're elected on a mandate of change, what they will do is give the absolute bare minimum. They'll give crumbs. That's what they're there for. So soon as they lost to, there was talk about bringing on this turkey Rahm Emanuel, and he's running. I guess he is running, right? Because DNC head is an elected position, and he probably will be elected / installed into that position, because it's not really democratic what goes on in the party. And yeah, I mean, that guy, covered up murder at the Chicago PD. He is completely insufferable. He hates the liberal end of the party, even though the liberal end of the party doesn't really control anything. And I mean, he hates liberals like most insiders. By the way, most insiders in the Democratic Party, they hate liberals. Just so that you know. Okay, so that's the real Democratic Party. So anyway, it is anyway, any which way you slice it, this was a disaster for the Democrats. And the only thing keeping them alive, really, is the fact that in the midterms, there are going to be less people voting. They're going to be partisan ideologues voting, college-educated people voting. And so that's advantage Democrats, right? Because those people tend to be more liberal, or those people tend to be more partisan Democrats, and so they stand an excellent chance of winning seats in the midterms. Plus, there's Republican overreach or whatever, so they stand a good chance of winning seats in the House. Whether they'll gain control or not remains to be seen. The Senate's a completely different thing that's very, very hard to predict. So unless there's a disaster in the economy, the Senate will probably remain under the control of the Republicans. And I don't see those things changing. And it's hard to make this assessment. I mean, what happened in 2022 in the midterms were the Democrats still lost control. It wasn't as bad as they had anticipated, but they still ended up losing seats. So we'll see what happens. But my guess is that, for whatever that's worth, because I didn't predict this election well, but my guess is they'll probably gain some seats, but they won't really gain control of the House. And I just don't see this party as anything other than moribund, really. I mean, they haven't been able to generate any kind of real interest or energy in years. Their talking points have been boring and stupid since at least 2014. And they're completely unable to do anything. The only person who had any kind of excitement at all was 2016 Bernie Sanders. And now we find ourselves in a situation he's not going to be running. The obvious contenders for 2028 are Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg. I don't think those are particularly interesting candidates. I don't know what you think, but give me your opinion and your viewpoint and your feedback. I'd love to hear from you. Again, forgive my bad camera work, but it is what it is. I'll talk to you guys later. And yeah, drop me a message. Bye.